Are we men protecting our women? Every human life created requires a woman putting her life on the line, risking possible death herself to complete the journey of delivering that child. Whether or not who with or when to reproduce is the single most important personal and irreversible decision you can ever make. Nothing else compares in consequence. In terms of effects on your life, reproductive rights are second only to the right to vote itself. Regressive illiberals are falsely accusing our beautiful progressive women out there of wanting to, quote, murder babies. This sociopathic incantation too often flies uncontested. I'm aware it's a radioactive subject, but since it's a top voting issue, that's exactly why they have forced me to find a little time today to do what I believe Jesus would do. Flip over these tables and go straight at this bully derangement syndrome towards our most vulnerable. I'm not running for office, so this isn't political, but just free speech observation. I only mention political parties because only the Republican Party is blocking the progress. So this is more just a common sense, survival, basic, honest, human decency type thing. There's infinite examples of damage here, but I'm going to try to make this as short and as polite as possible. It's a sweeping assessment, attempting to undo centuries of disinformation in a caring, loving way, and I need every sentence to lay out a comprehensive context. Please listen to the very end to fully understand. I celebrate being corrected and will answer every question you have in the comments. Late stage procedures in the 7th, 8th, and especially the 9th month are extreme medical emergencies by women trying to have children. It's not intelligent to think women are just sitting around risking their own life in total discomfort, letting a fetus develop until the 8th or 9th month just because they want to murder their own baby at the very end. Imagine how sadistically twisted you expose yourself as being to draw that conclusion instead of the logical, medical, conservative explanation we are begging evangelicals to consider. I think it should be illegal, at least of defamation at minimum, to falsely accuse traumatized women of murdering their own babies. I think it should be illegal to force a woman to give birth in the case of rape. Forcing a traumatized woman to see the face of the rapist in her own child. Have you ever thought about how sadistic that is to want that? The only law we can pass that will safely apply to, cover, and protect all the daily infinite variety of health complications and time-sensitive emergencies that can and do arise from women's pregnancies is comprehensive reproductive freedom and complete access to life-saving health care. All cases across the board should be the ultimate choice of the mother with her doctor's advice, protected under HIPAA standard personal medical health privacy. Besides the partner, it's no one else's business. Full stop. To take someone that you will never even meet while voting to cut help with responsibilities and feel the urge to force them to give birth against their will into a likely volatile or dangerous condition while obstructing possible necessary medical protection is among the most barbaric, unintelligent, and just plain cruel things in human history. With comprehensive reproductive freedoms, everyone gets what they want. This ruling safely covers the infinite spectrum of time-sensitive life or death medical complications that do arise and are impossible to litigate individually. At the same time, any individual who is conditioned to rigidly interpret life beginning before birth and doesn't approve will never be forced to have these medical procedures. Neither side forces their view on the other, and everyone's needs are met. No law or use of tax money can exactly cover every individual situation without making someone uncomfortable somewhere. Real solutions require uncomfortable honesty. To think that the microscopic, well under 1% of tax money spent on these medical emergencies should be unauthorized simply because you personally don't understand or approve of it is totally unrealistic. During a highly contagious viral world pandemic, regressives suddenly screamed about HIPAA privacy, even though vaccination records have been required in military schools and group organizations since the vaccination's inception. In cases of reproductive emergencies, it's a major personal individual crisis, not a publicly contagious virus. So under the standard HIPAA privacy, you won't even be made aware these procedures are happening. So there's no religious guilt or shame for regressives to somehow find all of a sudden now, this one time, by forcing yourself into other people's emergency with zero knowledge, simply because you have been conditioned to disapprove. But if you really disapprove tax money going to stopping human heartbeats, and all life is precious to you, I have some defense contract numbers I'd love to compare with you. Please make that argument. Just as one tiny example, spending untold millions of dollars purposefully bombing a school, killing almost 200 children, is widespread public knowledge, but it was very much against my personal pro-life beliefs. And trust me, LIGHTNIN Malcolm loves life much, much, much more than you do. Believe me. Voting patterns prove Democrats are the only entity budgeting for the care of women and children's lives. It's night and day. They are the only thing blocking a complete privatized collapse to our standards of living. Never mind what you say your faith is. You have already shown us with your ruthless, draconian budgets over and over who you really are. But Republican politicians very effectively manipulate and misdirect the sorrow we all feel when life is lost as a primal emotional wedge issue. They maximize the fetus feeling 5 seconds of pain that no person celebrates and minimize the constant enduring trauma of forcing a defenseless baby into likely a dangerously abusive and relentlessly volatile environment of an involuntary, unstable, or incapable mother. If fetus pain was their real concern, why also be against birth control? Creating an innocent life you are not equipped to provide for is the most universal, fiscally irresponsible move humans can make. Instead of protecting women and children's health, evangelicals have completely prioritized demonizing women's behavior. Not their behavior, the woman's. This is to deflect and distract, to hide the fact Republicans are lobbied to cut every penny from women and children programs they can possibly get away with. Gun violence is the #1 cause of death to children in America. Instead of common sense regulation, they flood the streets with drugs and combat weapons our armed forces keep under lock and key on their bases. They do this, and then they think and pray for a miracle. It's virtue signaling as they abandon babies. It's their vulturistic capitalization of trapping humans into exploitable, uneducated poverty that is the most guaranteed real-life threat these women and children face. The word conservative has to be the most misdirected word in American history. To me, the word conservative means safe, well within the boundaries of evidence. If you think the answer is 10, then a conservative guess is 8. To use in examples, Republicans have only created 1 million jobs compared to Democrats creating over 50 million jobs during the same time frame. The one so-called black president out of almost 50 was a Democrat. Republicans only have one so-called black senator out of over 50. I think about 4 so-called black representatives out of over 200 in the House. This repetitively proves a systemic reality of between 98 and 99% one race in Republican leadership. I won't tell you which race. You can do your own research and find out which one it is. I don't want to cause problems. And its undeniable connection to failed policy, such as job creation. Not 60, 70, or 80, but very upper 90% one race in 2026. In debate, if I say 98% one race and they find a study somewhere with an estimate of only 97.4, they will say I'm lying and reject my obvious claim on a technicality. So a conservative estimate is 95% one race. Even though I'm ceding ground to my opposition, I feel my very conservative and very charitable 95% still overwhelmingly proves the point. 100% of Democrats voted to release the Epstein, Trump, Putin deep state files, regressive's words, and any Democrat voting against that would be removed from the party within minutes. Conversely, and so consistently, the, again, under 2% of Republicans that voted for release of the files are being ran out for committing the most hostile act ever against the Republican Party. Their words. The euphoria that my idea is more conservative than your idea, that's a powerful drug. They are helplessly addicted to this drug, and the passkey this crutch gives them to try to claim authorship of universal human virtues, to commandeer custody of law enforcement and military infrastructure, and then pull the ladder up, maliciously creating conflict to form a moat around themselves. In their words, to take a blowtorch and a wrecking ball to American institutions with radicalized religious ideas that can't withstand even the most rudimentary fact-checking. Their historically sadistic heritage and expertise is land inquisition, not normal, balanced, healthy social or sexual behavior. It's laid bare from Indian removal, American slavery, ripping families apart, and burning women at the stake for being witches in seizure of property, all modernized in Project 25. When you attach your heritage to Confederate symbolism, you reveal yourself as your own worst enemy. They hypnotize themselves as conservative or more pro-life than the people out here actually collectively bargaining for progressively better standards of living, such as voter rights, universal health care, worker and consumer protections, regulating corporate monopolization, and the conservation of life's habitat through safer, renewable, cleaner energies. They do not see how flawed they present themselves, projecting their own strange sexual hang-ups and insecurities onto innocent people that are halfway normal with fairly healthy, balanced social and sex lives. Republicans live in constant fear of being turned gay or hallucinations of languishing in invisible hellfire, punished for something they've done that must be really, really bad. Speaker Johnson, third in line to the kingdom, tells us himself on camera that he has to share his porn intake with his teenage son to keep himself from going off the rails in what must be a crippling porn addiction. And he's comfortable just assuming that we're all as deranged as him. And all of that is an incredible improvement from the all-out psychological warfare on our women and children of his boss, the tiki torchbearer of modern conservatism. Republicans are the polar opposite of the yardstick in which to measure one's moral and ethical standing. Don't tell us reproduction is a fringe issue. When Republican president was caught in transcripts committing treason against the U.S. and NATO, blocking defense with election interference in Ukraine to facilitate and leverage the eventual Russia invasion, Republican senators never said he was innocent or didn't do it. They couldn't because we know it was a recorded call with the transcripts. No, instead they said, we can't impeach him because he's appointing religious judges to overturn Roe versus Wade. That's what they said. I turned white as a ghost just watching them say that. And Vladimir Putin turned even whiter hearing all of this. Not he's appointing judges who will enforce human, civil, voting, or reproductive rights, or Jesus' top request, raising corporate tax rates to deter monopolies and help the least among us. No, the single greatest cause to the collapse of democratic law and order seems to run directly through stopping reproductive freedoms. That's why I'm making this entire statement. This doesn't mean that we don't love and cherish our children, our precious children, through hard times. Of course, many accidental pregnancies turn into very happy families. But the odds greatly increase for happier stability if the actual parents choose when they are ready, not politicians. If a woman wants to deliver and put up for adoption, let her decide that. It's disingenuous to pretend not to understand the seriousness and the irreversibility of irresponsible or unplanned parenthood. This attitude reveals how little they respect the institution of parenthood. If conservative means carefully planned, then Planned Parenthood, use of contraception, safe sex, and careful reproduction are much more conservative family values because they deliver a much more stable and positive environment for both parent and child. To me, it's radical to conclude that you will burn in invisible eternal fire if you practice safe sex, use contraception, or do not follow through with the irreversible decision of an unplanned accidental pregnancy, or even worse, a case of rape. How can these people be against Planned Parenthood? See, now they forced me to talk about stuff like this. The human body requires regular hormone release for a healthy balance. Not only is self-release healthy maintenance, it's the best possible enabler of the holy abstinence that you're so bent on. Are these people really suggesting that every release or sexual experience should be for the sole purpose of creation? I mean, this is just too weird to be taken serious, but it shows you the lengths they will go to facilitate your reckless decision into unplanned parenthood. Why would you send your child out into this world with less than the best information available? I'm not. As women age, the possibility of health complications during pregnancy only increase. Let's say a husband and wife with 2 children try to have a third. They run into emergency health complications in a state with no reproductive freedoms. Now they must travel several states over to where it is allowed. But the way these draconian rulings are vaguely drafted, in many of the home states, the entire family, including the other children, can be given the death penalty or life in prison just for assisting mom, being by her side while she faces the scariest crisis of her life. That's the legal reality of what they are codifying. And it can't be modified for every individual emergency. Women are bleeding out in hospital parking lots every day, having to almost die in excruciating pain before doctors can move to save their lives. In many of these cases, doctors risk life sentences or the death penalty themselves just for saving the woman's life. Or waiting to call the governor for permission, who surely is busy running a whole state and has zero information about the life or death decision he's suddenly being asked to play God with. Why? Why are we writing laws that are purposely throwing our health and legal system into life or death chaos? Surely claiming it's a religious view immediately disqualifies the argument in legal courts in obvious violation with the simple text of the First Amendment separation of church and state. A religious or faith-based belief requires the absence of evidence. If there's evidence, it no longer is religious or faith-based, but a normal evidence-based determination. Surely the evidence-based belief is by far the more conservative, and the faith-based religious interpretation is far more radical by every metric. You have every right to your own personal radical beliefs in the privacy of your own home, life, or voluntary club. When you force your own evidence-free interpretations onto others, you justifiably force evidence to defend itself from you. No better example exists of why faith-based interpretations can never stand side by side with fact-based determinations in legislation than comprehensive reproductive freedoms. But if you really believe the loss of every fetus is a murder of life, then logically you must be absolutely hateful of the all-responsible God you pray to, who allows probably thousands of miscarriages a day in the world's population. In these regressively twisted laws, traumatized women trying to have children can now possibly face murder charges for a miscarriage. If these people really believe in the afterlife, like they say, maybe it's best to view these tiny heartbeats as innocent souls transitioning from harm's way, away from this wicked world, directly to a peaceful and safe rest in eternal heaven, where, according to them, that's where the real life begins. It's okay, in fact, very liberating, to admit some things we were raised up in were great and some things were very wrong and backwards. Personal evolution increases, not decreases, your connection with your Creator. Strong faith is built on broadening your scope and expanding your horizons. Accepting these reproductive realities doesn't drive a wedge between you and your personal faith in a Creator. It drives a wedge between you and dishonest profiteers using empathy for the loss of life to capitalize off of resentments. This dishonest confusion discredits and offsets much of the church's very positive socialistic and communistic charitable work and contributions. Churches would be so much stronger, especially in rapidly evolving progress of instant fact-checking and cameras everywhere, to separate themselves from these antiquated, overreaching encroachments and capitalizations of personal freedoms and beliefs. Young people desperately need the example of the Good Samaritan who can evolve to the latest evidence. These regressive, intellectually immature, and sexually insecure views of biology, science, and medical procedures are a tragedy for our young people. Overwhelming unplanned pregnancies and sexual abuse happen in repressed red states. Instead of blocking or attacking medical facilities, contraception, and biological education, please, for God's sakes, donate your time sharing your better angels in less divisive and more productive ways, such as helping with an orphanage or children's programs or a woman's shelter. Republicans are funneling untold billions per day on an unapproved war on false pretenses of weapons of mass destruction. Once again, this time they don't even have a 9/11. All while actually pardoning domestic terrorists, removing real bomb screening from our own very most crucial capital at full staff on January 6th. On that day, our enemies didn't need nuclear weapons. Just walk up and drop duffel bags or backpack demolitions could have shut out America's lights. We could have lost World War III in a single afternoon. In fact, at press time, America is poised to erase any doubt it's the number one state sponsor of terror, with Republicans' latest almost $2 billion slush fund to make their unvetted mercenaries millionaires. They are lobbied to cut every penny they can get away with from women and children's programs, while their idea of stopping fraud is shutting down daycare centers and food assistance for starving children. I mean, how can these people be taken serious? Again, 100% of Democrats voted to release the Epstein, Trump, Putin deep state files. The under 2% of Republicans that voted to release the files committed the most hostile act ever against the party. Their words, not mine. How is this not game over? Are these really the people to lecture us about heaven and hell, or protecting woman and child, or who values life more, or what's conservative and what's radical, or defending the homeland, or fiscal responsibility? Men, we have the resources. Do we have the resolve? Set aside petty differences and unite to vote Democrat in every position for progress and liberty on women and children's rights, reproductive freedoms, comprehensive reproductive freedoms, universal health care, and a better public education system that can break this generational cycle of divisive and sadistic misdirection and disinformation.